I am Scott Vanderwall. I am the Industrial FRP Product Manager for Minoxidant. A couple of months ago when our department was discussing what to do for this webinar, the idea came up of doing a webinar on our industrial lines. Now when that came up, a quote came to mind. This is by Henry Ford, and I'm sure most of you have heard this before. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Now, I thought of that saying in reference to our reps. Many of our reps around the country go after industrial projects, so they're familiar with what we're looking for, what we have to provide. Some of the rep agencies are not. This webinar is essentially for them, as well as the other reps, but we're trying to show that some of the business is out there and what you should be looking for. Industrial fiberglass markets. What are we talking about? Essentially, we're talking about any of the fiberglass products that are not HVAC related. That is underduct, VE duct, those product lines. So you're essentially looking at OEM products. They are typically one-time sale or project. Typically long life products, and usually you're not going to get too much repeat business out of that. There may be modifications that come along where you can add to it, but typically once the sale's made and the installation's done, it's done. Basics of the product. To sell it, you have to understand what it is. So what is fiberglass reinforced plastics? Essentially, it's a composite material. So you have a liquid resin that's catalyzed, applied to a random glass, and allowed to set through chemical reaction. Once that's set, you have a thermoset resin that creates a structural material. So you can theoretically build large, lightweight structures that can support much stress, much force. In addition to that, we address and try to service corrosion markets. So corrosion applications are a forte for Minoxidant. And of course, we build everything to national standards, ASTM, etc. The photograph top left shows a filament winding operation. That is one of two methodologies that typically are used in the creation of fiberglass products. So strands of glass run through a liquid bath of resin and catalyst and are applied or wound onto the mandrel and allowed to set. The center photograph is that of a hand layup operation, perhaps even a spray up. But essentially, you have a mold in this case, and you're applying glass to a large surface and rolling it out manually. And then the photograph on the right is of a combination of the two. So you've wound your pipe, which becomes a stack, and you have a hand layup operation which has created the curbing and gusseting for the same. Thermoset plastics essentially are resins, as we had talked about. There are 5 families basically of resins: phenolics, epoxies, acrylics, isophthalics, which are polyesters, and vinyl esters. Vinyl esters are typically what we will be looking at using on most projects. The reason for that, vinyl esters are very, very good in terms of structural capacities. They're durable, they can absorb a lot of punishment. They're lightweight, and they can give you that lightweight to strength ratio. Of course, 2 things that you always have to specify in a spec or in any project, whether there are temperature considerations or a fire retardancy that's necessary. The reasons for that are that we will have to take a look at what resin should apply and be used for any given scenario or situation. Photographs in the top left show some of the pipes that we have produced in our plant. The center photograph is a wastewater treatment plant of installed ductwork. And the photograph on the right is of a stack that's going to be lifted and put into place. You can see the breeching, which is essentially pointed down. Fabrication standards. As I said before, we build all of our products to national standards. The oldest being the NSB PS 1569, which was essentially an all-encompassing standard for fiberglass ductwork. The ASTM C582 is the most general of the ASTM standards relative to fiberglass. From there you get into more specific and specified situations and conditions that the standards address, whether it be tanks, ductwork, etc. And one of the latest standards that we build to is an RTP1 for vessels. Laminate construction. Laminate construction is comprised of two parts, a corrosion barrier and structural layers. The corrosion barrier is essentially made up of a veil, which is resin rich to the point of approximately 95%. Then that's backed by 2 layers of chopped strand mat, which again, you're looking for a resin rich surface. So you're going to add 75% resin to 25% glass in those layers. That resin rich surfacing is going to protect your fiberglass from the chemical environment that's inside of the tank or the ductwork. Now, you may also, depending on the chemical, have more layers of veil added, but that typically will not be the case. The structural layers are typically a 60-40 mixture of resin to glass, and you will usually have chopped strand mat, if not all the way through it, certain layering, and then added layers of either a woven roving, a 24 ounce in most cases, or a unidirectional glass. And that's applied if you need strength in a single direction, as with a stack. Types of projects and sources. What we typically look for are markets such as the water, wastewater areas for municipalities, or chemical and manufacturing plants, acid plants on the industrial side. We also try to look for pulp and paper opportunities as well as food. Food's a little tougher. There's far greater requirements associated with that. However, if you have any of these type of markets open and available to you, typically you will be able to find some type of fiberglass product that they will be periodically needing. The photos below are both of a wastewater treatment plant. The photo on the left is of the Des Moines wastewater treatment plant. That's 5-foot diameter duct that rises up and turns and runs horizontally through a bridge work. Those are 20-foot sections that are flanged and have flex boots attached to them. That allows the duct to grow and shrink depending on what the temperature extremes are. That duct was put in approximately 11 years ago, and it still looks as good today as it did the day that it first showed up on site and the contractors installed it. Contacts. As with most things in life, it's not just who you know, but also who knows you. What we're talking about are those relationships that you may have with engineers or contractors where they know and trust you. They believe in your company, they believe in your product lines. Those are the type of relationships Minoxidant wants to try and encourage and also utilize for, obviously, the sale of our products. If you have those relationships in place, it's much easier to have a knowledge of any of the projects that may be upcoming before everybody else does. So what we want to try and get into, or who we want to try and see, are project engineers, estimators, anyone within an engineering or architectural office who is in charge of spec creation. We would like to get Minoxidant spec'd into each and every project we can. Another good source would be contractors. If you have a solid relationship with contractors, they oftentimes will utilize your product lines even if you didn't necessarily win the bid. And finally, trade shows can be useful at times in terms of making new contacts, maybe with an engineering company that's outside of your specific area, but you have an ability to bid some of their projects or get some of their work. Maybe they're doing a job in your market, even though they're actually physically headquartered someplace else. Web project sources that we utilize. Typically we look at CDM Insight for the majority of the jobs off the web. We've also utilized iSquareFoot, Onvia, BidSync, and we can't discount websites for engineering companies where they post projects that they are currently looking at or looking to build. All those can be excellent sources for information on what's happening in your market. Bidding jobs. Time, as with most things in life, is critical in terms of bidding or building projects and products. We would really appreciate getting more accurate drawings and specifications. Of course, we know that that's not always the case, but if you can provide us with a complete package or something close to that, it makes life much easier and we wind up with no surprises at the end or during the project. You also have to understand or make your customer understand that there has to be some allowances in terms of lead times to build some of these projects or even to bid some of these. We often get requests for bids and it's due that afternoon or the next morning. We do our best to accommodate that. However, it would be much better to have a little bit of time that we can actually look at what the package is and then bid it to more fully anticipate getting everything in there that we need to. Remember, these are typically not off-the-shelf products, so it's not like we have a scad of components sitting someplace waiting to be picked and shipped to a job site. These are all built specifically for the project at hand. It's all OEM custom work to one degree or another. And you have to understand that and allow us time. Selling points for the Minoxidant lines. Obviously, we've talked about corrosion resistance. That is primarily the markets and the product benefit that we look at for the majority of our products. They're also watertight. One thing to remember, as we talked about before, these projects are typically one of a kinds. It's a proven and durable product. Fiberglass has been around since the 50s. And typically, once you sell these jobs, as I said before, you're not going to get a lot of repeat business out of them because they are a long life product. You're talking about 20, 30 years of life in some of the tanks and ductwork that we have sold and put into production. We also offer a factory manifolding, which is something that a lot of the competitors don't. They'll sell the pieces and parts and the sticks of duct or pipe, but the contractor himself has to put all this together, and the contractor also assumes liability for that. So if we can pre-manifold in up to 20-foot lengths some of the ductwork or some of the componentry, that cuts down on a lot of the labor that the contractor has to do. We have lead compatible joining options for some of the above floor air ducting or lab ducting. So you could take advantage of that as a competitive edge versus anyone else that's in the market. We offer an experienced design and manufacturing group. We have well over 40 years experience in terms of designing. We have over 98,000 square feet in terms of production capacity space. And of course, we'll look at the specifics of any job, take into account the considerations, wind, seismic, pressure, vacuum, any of the essentials that go with that bid package to tailor the best product for your customer. And again, we build everything to the standards, whether it's ASTM, SMACNA, or any other specific specification that a company may have. We had talked about trying to get the Minoxidant name into specifications. Some of the things that we can assist with is interpretation of the standards, the ASTMs, etc., in terms of translating that into a specification, a product specification. So things such as wall thicknesses, flange thicknesses, whether or not it should be a class 1 product. We can look at all of these things as well as others and assist the engineers with putting out a product in terms of a spec that truly addresses what they're trying to achieve, what the customer's end goal is. Many times we'll see specs that come out with information that contradicts itself. That's frustrating, and that also opens up a huge opportunity to misquote a job. If they're looking for class 1 duct, but they spec a resin that's not going to get you there, so to speak. If you bid it as a class 1, but somebody else bids it according to the resin, they may wind up with a cheaper bid or estimate and then try to sort out the details after the fact, or deliver a product that doesn't meet the requirements that were originally intended, and then you have an unhappy customer and they have a product that they have to use unless they reject it, obviously, but you may not be able to get back in the door and say we can provide you with what you really need. So who is it that creates these specifications? We had talked about some of the architectural and engineering houses and the staff that typically goes after this. You'll have engineers at times. Typically you're going to find somebody like an engineer in training that's being tasked with pulling boilerplate type information together. And since they're a relatively new engineer in whatever industry it happens to be, they typically go a little bit overboard maybe with some of the boilerplate information. And again, that gets back to seeing the spec or being able to sort through everything and tell them what can or can't apply and how it fits and the reasons why. Again, if we can work with you, our reps, in terms of sharing that information or give it to you so that you can look like you're the expert on site, that helps everybody in the long run in terms of securing those projects and building that trust that we had talked about before. We can supply specs to the customer. We have boilerplate specs, so to speak, that we've written that you can access online and download. If there's something more specific needed, we can also provide that. This slide in particular shows some of the projects or types of projects that we can become involved with. So we can supply tanks, we can supply exhaust systems, we can do hoods, lab duct, we can do ducting in general, scrubbers, dome covers, arched covers, troughs, flat covers, a myriad of products that can service, again, municipalities or industrial and chemical facilities. Let's talk for a second about the product lines, Minoxidant markets. Essentially, there are 5 lines in the FRP area. You have underduct for HVAC, underduct VE or vehicle exhaust, for extracting automotive fumes from a building, carrying it underfloor and out through an exhaust system. You have your hybrid lab duct. You have your corrosion composites and your industrial composites. For most industrial applications, they're again OEM, one of a kind, and we will have something specific that we need to design for that. On occasion, you may cross into corrosion composites product areas for your industrial clientele, as well as, rarely, but every now and then, you may wind up with a hybrid lab duct being utilized by maybe a municipality or some type of a chemical industrial company. So we can fall back or utilize some of these other product lines to also service the same markets or the same customers. Let's drill down for a second and take a look at some of the specific product lines that Minoxidant can supply. Ductwork is obviously a bread and butter line for us. Again, we build to the standards, PS 1569, ASTM's 582 or 2996, to name a few. Shapes. We can essentially wind just about any shape that a customer can come up with. Obviously, round is going to give more bang for the buck. However, oftentimes we'll see rectangular and occasionally oval on some of the drawings. Your considerations that need to be discussed and understood are the conditions that need to be met. What is it in terms of air going through that ductwork? Or do you truly need something like pipe? Are you dealing with a fluid? What are your pressures? What is the vacuum? Is there any? Temperature considerations. And again, we can do factory assembly and manifolding of most of the ductwork that goes on site. 20-foot sections are what we typically look at. Photos on the bottom of the slide. To the left, you can see a gentleman applying a veil to the outside of a length of duct as it's on the mandrel being glassed. Photo on the right is of an ammonia recovery system. In the background, in the yellowish building or tan building, are a couple of scrubbers that the ductwork will tie into eventually. So the duct is routed throughout a couple of different buildings for this process. Another product line that we get involved with, stacks. A little more difficult for us because we don't have an on-site engineering staff that can address these. But we do have to be aware of some of the considerations such as seismic considerations, wind load. How is this going to be mounted? Is it a base mount? Are you going to tie this within a structure? Is it going to be guide? Things of that nature. Also, obviously important, chemical environment. What's going to actually be going through this stack? What's the speed at which you want to exhaust the air? The photograph on the left is of a no-loss stack that we provided to the U.S. government at the Rock Island Arsenal in Rock Island, Illinois. They have a bank of PVC stacks that are becoming fragile, to say the least. They're aging, starting to have issues. So we built for them a fiberglass stack, and essentially it was easier to install, took less to install in terms of securing it, and it is outperforming any of the PVC stacks. The photograph to your right is a stack liner that we developed. We had 3 stacks at Michigan sugar plants that needed to have work done to them, either replace them or find a way to save them. And what we developed was a liner system where you have sockets on the top side of the liner segments that align themselves and seat as they're installed in the stack. And then the very top section has a flange that's bolted in place. Tanks are another product line that we get involved with and provide to our customers. Obviously, again, the standards apply. So 582 of the ASTM line, 3299, 4097, and also, again, RTP1. We are not certified to build an RTP1 tank. We can build it, we just can't stamp off on it. Some of the design considerations: the sizes, the pressures, the vacuums, so your performance issues. Chemical environment, again, very critical. We do not skimp or cheat on building tanks. We will not give an appropriate liner and use submaterial for the structural layers. Whatever it is that is being spec'd is what you will find throughout the build. Some other considerations: the locations. Is the tank indoors or outdoors? Photograph on the left is of a petroleum recovery tank that we built for Alcoa in Riverdale, Iowa. It's essentially going to go inside the building. So we have a raw fiberglass tank, essentially, that was hot coated in terms of a finish. So it's a resin with a wax mixture, but it allows the tank to be fairly translucent. The tank on the right is at a chemical plant, molybdenum plant, in Fort Madison, Iowa, and obviously it's outdoors. So we utilize a UV protected gel coat on the exterior so that it will not have degradation from sunlight and the environment in general. We also can tie in ductwork or piping to these tanks, as well as look at whether or not they need to be RTP1 equal. And obviously, what's the access that's necessary on these tanks? Will somebody need to eventually get in through the top, the side? Is there ladders, as with the photograph on the right, that need to be installed? Plating lines are an excellent opportunity to showcase what fiberglass can do. They can become a complete turnkey system. So you can have your tank, your hood, your duct, your exhaust stack, even your fan if necessary, all made from fiberglass. We can embed steel or other structural supports into the tanks to assure that over time any flexing or chemical attack of the tank at the corners will not become an issue. Earlier we mentioned that laboratory duct could be a possibility within the industrial fiberglass area. What you may run into is a situation or a project where it's within a building such as an institution, a school, something along those lines, and they want a corrosion resistant interior, and yet they need the class 1 finish on the exterior. So we have a dual laminate in essence. We can accommodate that. Very easy for us to do. Also keep in mind we can supply this in a single wall or a double wall insulated, and if necessary we also have lead methodology in terms of joining the ductwork, which you can ask about. We'd be more than happy to share that information with you. The photograph lower right is at Ohio State University. This in particular was a very good project for us because it involved really all of the Crawford company, Crawford being our parent company. Crawford built the steel componentry, Minoxidil supplied the flex hoses and ducting for this lab, photo lab, to exhaust corrosive or exhaust or chemical fumes. Another product line we get involved with are scrubber systems. We team with companies that do the actual design of the scrubbers, and then we provide the bodies and the ductwork that lead to and from the scrubbers. Photograph in the top center and bottom center are of an electrostatic precipitator that we built and sold to Climax Molybdenum in Fort Madison, Iowa. We've done 2 of these systems for them over the years. We can wind, in essence, anything in a diameter of 2 inches up to 14 feet. If it's beyond that, we would have to take some considerations into how to produce it. The photograph on the right is of a small system that is a Venturi system. So again, we're looking at what the environments are. We have to have the considerations of how pure the air needs to be as it exits the scrubber, and also look at what's tied to it, either in front of or in back of it. So we can design any system in terms of the actual fiberglass componentry, but we team with whoever the scrubbing system designers are to make sure that it's going to work for the customer. Troughs are something that periodically we'll be asked to build. Typically they're going to go into water plants, or they may go into an industrial facility. We can do standalone systems, flanged systems that tie lengths together, or we could do an in-floor system and have a grading system put over the top of it. We also build things such as weir plates. Any of the standalone troughs will typically have some type of a reinforcement, structural reinforcement added to them, such as balsa wood or maybe a foam. So that, again, it's a lightweight material, but it's very high strength, very durable. The photograph that you see in this slide is of the Calumet water plant in the Metro Chicago area. We did 4 120-foot runs for their system, and we added an abrasion coating to the inside of the troughs. So these are extremely durable, should hold up without a problem for many, many years. Flat covers are a classic FRP application. Again, lightweight, very high strength. Core materials typically that we'll look at using on the covers would be primarily balsa wood, but you could also use plywood or a particle board. You can also use foam or some type of a polymer or steel if it has some structural integrity issue. The photographs on this slide were taken at the Detroit wastewater treatment plant at River Rouge. These are scum pipes that they wanted to put secondary containment pans under in case of a pipe failure or a burst. One of the criteria for the covers was it had to be very light enough that a man could take it off and put it back on by himself. We accomplished that through the balsa wood. It also had to be durable enough that you could drive a lawnmower across the top of it. Again, we accomplished that through the matrix of fiberglass and resin, and also embedding the balsa within that. Dome covers, much the same as flat, typically will utilize some type of a core stiffener, whether that be inserting a balsa interior layer or developing some type of a shape or profile in the mold itself that translates to the part. So once the part is pulled, it has some type of a rigidity factor to it. Domes typically are custom build products. We will turn a flange up at the outer edge for a stiffener, and we will segment these in sizes that make sense in terms of shipping to a job site. So if we can get it on a truck, we can send it. The photographs that you see on this slide were of two domes. You can see in the lower photograph that they're mounted in place, that went to a 3M chemical facility in Illinois. So these segments are mechanically fastened together with hardware and then lifted in place and then bolted down to the concrete tanks that they sit on. Some other products that we can manufacture using fiberglass for industrial applications include those listed on the slide: hoods, dampers, blast gates, etc. The photographs that are on this slide show a couple of dampers that are built out of a fire retardant material. The only thing metal on these dampers is the actuator handles, which are 304 stainless. The photo to the upper right is of some mist eliminator systems that we manufactured and shipped to Texas. The lower right is of a fiberglass plenum that we built for Lubrisol in Louisville, Kentucky. We've done a couple of these systems for them in Kentucky. Also sent one to Holland, and we've done various sizes of these for them through the years. But it's essentially a CPVC powder operation, and 316 stainless was being used in the plenums prior to the fiberglass, and the 316 stainless was being attacked and corroding. These systems have been in place for close to 30 years, and they still operate the same as they did day one. The photo in the lower left is of a water wheel for the City of Kansas City water plant. We've manufactured close to 40 or approximately 40 of these over the last 30 years. And it's essentially a pneumatically driven wheel. So they're blowing air into the buckets on this wheel to turn a shaft that this is attached to, which turns agitating paddles in a flocculant system. So a very creative, one-of-a-kind type application. One of the things that I haven't touched on up to this point is another selling point, in essence. Minoxidant offers product support for their jobs, meaning if we sell a duct system, we will go out in terms of support and show the contractor how to do the wet joints or how to join it if they're using a different methodology. So we will schedule training and go on site. We will, if they require it, send them certifications that say that they are now a fiberglass certified technician. We stand behind all of our products for a minimum of 1 year, and we'll supply material to get the job done. The photograph top right is of me in New Albany, Indiana at a job site. I went there, worked with a contracting crew. The photo next to it on the left is of the crew. The photo below it on the left is, again, the same crew. So I'm teaching them how to wet out the glass, apply it, roll it out, and then monitor it to make sure that it hardens and everything's correct. This job in particular was a little bit of a problem in that it didn't match the drawings, and we had to cut apart the ductwork in 4 spots, swap duct around, and then rejoin it. Luckily, we had enough material to make that happen. So with fiberglass, you can very easily, on the fly, do modifications and changes and assure your customer that this is going to work. One of the things that we would like to see more of from our staff as well as from our reps is follow-up. Very basic. If we don't win a bid, why didn't we win it? I know this can be time consuming, but sometimes it's amazing the things that you can find out. You can find out who your competition is in that market. What's the pricing level? You may have gotten beat this time, but if you know where they're coming in on jobs, we can go back and take a look at the next project and make sure that we're more competitive. What's the market? Is there anything going on? Is there tons of work going on and you're just not aware of it? What can we come away with? What is it we can glean or learn from any of these situations, any of these projects, win, lose, or draw? So the $64,000 question becomes, what can we do to help? What can Minoxidant do to help you? Are you leaving money on the table because you're not realizing that there are markets open to work right in your backyard that you are not trying to capitalize on? We search for projects. We will bring these to the reps when we find them. It's up to you to go that extra step and do the submittal on it and chase the job. Stay on top of it. The relationship building that we talked about. How well do you know your customers? Do they like you? Do they trust you? The materials, the support, the products that we sell, we will do everything in our power to promote those for you. We will train you, your staff. We will train contractors. All of that helps to build your agency, your reputation, your image. We want to make you, obviously, the source for all of these product lines in your market, in your area. So again, what is it we can do to help you? So if you've seen our webinars before, or even if you haven't, you can always go to www.fiberglass-duct.com. There you can see product videos, photos, specifications, standards, tech data sheets, and more. Always good to go check it out periodically and see what's new in the world of Minoxidant. Finally, thank you for attending today's webinar. For those of you who are not currently pursuing industrial opportunities, please reconsider that and contact us so we can help you. For those of you that are, thank you, and we will continue to offer our support and products in an effort to make your company shine. If you'd like further information, you can feel free to contact by phone or email myself, Scott Vanderwall, Jim Wishusen, Sam Stelzner, or Liz Eichner. You can also go to www.minoxidant.com or info@minoxidant.com for further information. Again, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. We're going to turn the questions over to Sam Stelzner. Sam is in charge of engineering and design for Minoxidant FRP. And our first question is from Scott. Are there any other spec sections we should be searching for outside of the 230,000 to find more projects?
Yes, there's a couple other locations you can look into. There's the section 15s, and then there's the 8,000 and 9,000 sometimes, but mostly you'll find them in the 15,000s and the 23,000 sections.
Our next question, can you guys work with BIM data for doing quotes?
We sure can do that. That's not a problem. The biggest thing we would like is basically all the information you can give us, specifications for the project and drawings. That way we can get you, the more information you give us, the better quote we can get you guys.
Okay, we have a few more questions. Is the industrial FRP market separate and distinct from the plan and specification market, or do the two overlap?
The two markets can overlap. Typically, the end user and their teams are the ones working directly with manufacturers for the end result. Generally speaking, the plan and specification market involves public funding, whereas the industrial market is geared more towards private investment.
Are there many other FRP manufacturers working in the industrial market?
There are many manufacturers in the corrosion plan and specification market. However, the number drops off considerably in the industrial corrosion market.
Another question, what should be stressed to potential industrial customers that would want them to use minoxidant?
Perhaps the most important selling point that minoxidant in this in the industrial market is willing to do is getting involved with the custom FRP application. This is the driving factor into reducing the number of competitors in the industry.
Okay, and our last question. In an industrial setting, can you comment to the ease with which you can modify ductwork, tanks, etc. to add or remove additional items?
FRP is quite readily modified in the industrial setting, just as all FRP applications are. Minoxidant can assist contractors with the process required for the type of field work if required, and this is assistance that we can do overall for the project.
And we have one more question. Will you be including flex connectors in future bids? We have customers that want a complete system on bid day.
That's a great question. Typically we don't include flex connectors. However, if we get a project ahead of time, we can go the extra mile and get flex connector pricing for you guys. Typically we don't do that for every job because some reps out there, they already have these flex connectors, so you guys can supply your own. But if you guys would like them, yes, we can include them.
All right, thanks Sam, and thank you everyone for your great questions. Well, that concludes today's webinar, In Search of Industrial FRP Opportunities. Please contact our support team for design assistance, quoting, or any other requests. Please remember our website, fiberglass-duct.com, is home to a complete catalog and various other resources. This webinar and all previous webinars are on the Minoxidant YouTube channel. These presentations are linked off of our website, fiberglass-duct.com. Click the Dig Deeper tab and click Webinars. Minoxidant's next quarterly webinar will be Thursday, July 27th. The topic will focus on Minoxidant's source capture product line. We realize you all have busy schedules, and we genuinely appreciate the time you have spent with us. Thank you and have a great day.